The world of Aethelgard turns beneath two suns. One is the hearth, a great, cool, red star, vast in the sky, that pulses with a slow and rhythmic light. Its warmth is gentle, a constant, bathing presence that floods the long mornings in shades of deep amber and rose. The second sun is the Lamplight, a small, intensely blue-white point of fire, distant and sharp. It does not rise with the hearth, but follows it, hours behind, tracing a different path across the sky. When the lamplight rises, the world changes. The soft, red world of the hearth is suddenly cast in two lights. Sharp, violet shadows are thrown against the warm, amber ground. The sky itself, a pale rose during the red morning, deepens into an endless, hazy purple. This period is known as the twin light. The air is heavy, denser than the air of other, younger worlds. Sounds do not travel far, but when they do, they carry a deep resonance of fullness. The perpetual sigh of the wind moving over the land is not a whistle, but a low, resonant hum. And the air glitters. There is no rain here. Instead, the great fungal forests and the endless plains of moss release their spores into the high, slow currents. This is the spore-fall, a constant, silent descent of glittering microscopic particles, catching the twin lights like a veil of diamonds. It settles on everything, a fine, nutrient-rich dust that smells faintly of ozone and deep earth. The great land masses of Aethelgard are vast, dark, and ancient. The soil is not soil at all, but a dark, crystalline basalt, shattered over millennia by tectonic stillness and slow, cold erosion. From these dark plains rise the spires. These are not mountains in the traditional sense. They do not slope. They are sheer, hexagonal columns of black rock, rising vertically for miles, their flat tops lost in the perpetual haze of the upper atmosphere. They stand in great, silent clusters, like the abandoned architecture of giants. But the defining feature of this world is not the stone, but the light that moves upon it. These are the luminous flows. They are not rivers of water. They are vast, slow-moving symbiotic colonies, glaciers of living light. Great masses of bioluminescent moss, archaea, and fungi, bound together, moving at the pace of geological time. They flow from the cold, high plateaus, grinding the basalt plains into dust, filling the ancient valleys. By the light of the Red Hearth, they are a pale, silvery green. But as the world turns toward the long night, and the lamplight's cold fire reigns alone, the flows begin to glow. It is a cold, internal light, a soft, breathing luminescence of pale cyan and deep phosphorescent green, pulsing in slow, visible waves that move through the moss rivers. They illuminate the canyons they have carved, casting a moving, ethereal light onto the dark columns of the spires. The air around these flows is different. It is warmer and thick with a complex, sweet scent, like honey and static. The spore-fall is heaviest here, drawn to the moisture and energy of the living rivers. The shores of the flows are not sand, but a soft, deep loam created by centuries of shed spores and the slow decay of the flow's own edges. Here, the great fungal forests take root, towering, umbrella-shaped structures of pale, woody flesh. They do not have leaves. Instead, their vast, flat caps are covered in delicate, feathery gills that passively filter the glittering air, drawing sustenance from the constant spore-fall. The sound of the world is the hum of the wind through these fungal gills and the slow, tectonic groan of the luminous flows, grinding the rock, inches at a time, as they crawl toward the planet's sleeping sea. The fungal forests are quiet. Life here moves slowly, adapted to the low, resonant hum of the world. There are no birds. Instead, the heavy, spore-rich air is home to the sky jellies. Great, translucent beings of gossamer thin membrane, filled with lighter-than-air gases. They drift, weightless, between the towering fungal caps, trailing long, silken filaments to catch the glittering spores. Their movements are languid, predictable. They pulse with a faint, internal light, echoing the cyan glow of the luminous flows far below. They are solitary, ancient creatures, reproducing by budding only once every few centuries. In the twin light, their silhouettes are like stained glass, caught between the red and blue suns. On the forest floor, among the soft loam and basalt shards, live the trilopides. They are the grazers of this world, six-legged, armored creatures, low to the ground, with heavy, chitinous plates that mimic the crystalline rock. They move in slow, deliberate herds, scraping the nutrient-rich spores from the forest floor with complex, hardened mouthparts. Their most remarkable feature is their method of communication. They do not vocalize. Instead, they gently rub the edges of their armored plates together, producing a soft, tonal scraping, like the slow bowing of a cello. A herd of trilopides, grazing at dusk, fills the forest with a low, chordal thrum. It is a sound of absolute peace, a resonating harmony that settles over the land as the Red Hearth begins its long descent. But the forests and the flows are not empty of intelligence. Following the herds and tending to the edges of the light rivers are the people known as the Still Folk. They are tall, impossibly slender, with limbs that seem too long for their bodies. Their skin is not skin at all, but a smooth, polished, bark-like covering, the color of petrified wood, mottled with patches of pale green lichen. They are more plant than animal, drawing a portion of their energy directly from the twin light, photosynthesizing through their outer layers. They do not have faces in a recognizable sense. The front of their smooth, oblong heads is a single uninterrupted surface, save for 3 deep, vertical grooves. When they communicate, these grooves open, revealing soft, bioluminescent membranes within. They speak by modulating the light, pulsing in complex, silent patterns of cyan and gold. A conversation among the Still Folk is a silent gathering of light, a slow, gentle flickering in the twilight. Their movements are measured, unhurried. They practice a life of absolute economy, of minimal disturbance. They do not build structures. They do not forge metal. Their relationship with Aethelgard is not one of control, but of symbiosis. They live in the hollows of the great basalt spires, finding natural, wind-carved caves and crevices that face the luminous flows. They do not furnish these spaces, but instead cultivate them. They encourage the growth of specific, velvet-textured mosses on the walls and phosphorescent fungi on the ceilings, creating living shelters that glow with a soft, internal warmth. Their primary occupation is tending. They are the gardeners of the luminous flows, using long, smooth tools carved from the woody stalks of fallen fungi. They wade into the shallow, glowing edges of the light rivers. They gently clear obstructions. They dredge the richest, brightest patches of the living moss and guide them into new channels, encouraging the flow to spread and fertilize the dark basalt plains. They also tend to the great trilopides. They move among the herds without fear, their silent, glowing speech calming the armored grazers. They gently scrape the excess spore-fall from the creatures' backs, collecting the glittering dust in wide, shallow bowls of fungal wood. This collected dust is their sustenance. It is mixed with condensed moisture, scraped from the undersides of the great fungal caps, and allowed to ferment into a thick, glowing paste. It is their only food, an act of consumption that is also an act of cleaning, of service. Their society is not built on hierarchies, but on cycles. The oldest Still Folk are those who have rooted. When one becomes too old to walk, they are carried to a revered place on the banks of a luminous flow. They settle into the soft loam, and their feet extend, growing into the soil, becoming a permanent part of the forest. Their bodies harden, their internal light fades, and they become a kind of living, sentient tree, a silent, watching ancestor. The younger generations come to these rooted elders to commune, pulsing their lights against the ancient, living bark, seeking wisdom in the slow, photosynthetic silence. Life among the Still Folk is governed by the light. But it is not only the light of the 2 suns. It is also the deep, internal pulse of the luminous flows and the silent, flickering speech of their own bodies. Once every rotation, as the great Red Hearth begins its final, slow descent, and the blue lamplight casts its sharp, singular glow over the world, the still folk gather. This is the time of the great dimming. It is a slow, unhurried pilgrimage. From their carved hollows in the basalt spires, they descend. They move in silent, single-file lines, their long, slender forms casting impossibly thin shadows in the cold, blue light. They carry their shallow, fungal wood bowls, heaped with the fermented, glowing spore paste. They gather on the banks of the widest, most ancient luminous flow. Here, the living river is miles across, its cyan light so bright it rivals the distant lamplight, pulsing in great, slow, visible waves of energy. There is no music, no speech. There is only the low, chordal thrum of the wind moving through the high fungal caps and the sound of the trilipede herds, settling for the night in the deep, soft loam. The still folk spread out along the bank, standing yards apart, until a long, glowing line of them mirrors the river's edge. They stand for a long time, motionless. They are observing the flow, attuning themselves to its rhythm. Their own internal lights, hidden within their bark-like chests, begin to pulse in the same slow, cyan cadence as the great light river before them. Then as one, they begin. This is the ritual known as the light weaving. They dip their long, smooth-fingered hands into the glowing paste. Taking up a small amount, they extend their arms over the water. They do not throw the paste. They simply open their hands, letting the dense, luminescent material fall, pattering softly onto the surface of the flow. Where the spore paste touches the living moss of the river, a reaction occurs. The paste is a concentrate of the world's energy, and the flow is its active heart. A new, brilliant light flares, a shimmering, intense gold. This gold light, born from the cyan, begins to swirl and drift, carried by the slow, viscous current. The still folk continue, adding their offerings in a steady, meditative rhythm. Each small offering blossoms into a swirling, golden eddy. The patterns are complex, fractal. They merge, creating vast, slow-moving tapestries of gold and cyan light, drifting down the great river into the darkness. This is not an act of worship. It is an act of participation. The patterns they create are a form of silent communication with the world itself. By observing the way the golden spores drift and swirl, the still folk read the health of the flow. They read the changes in the spore-fall, the coming shifts in the wind, the slow, tectonic mood of Aethelgard. It is also their most profound form of shared history. The still folk keep no written records. They build no monuments. Their history is woven into the light itself. The patterns they weave are ancient, passed down from elder to elder. They're a recounting of the past. A specific swirl of gold may signify the great spore drought of the 9th Aeon. A pulsing, circular pattern may recall the birth of a new fungal forest. They are, in effect, writing their story onto the living page of the river. A story that is immediately carried away, dissolving into the whole. For the still folk, history is not a static thing to be preserved, but a flowing energy to be acknowledged, honored, and then released. As they weave, their own internal lights grow brighter, shifting from cyan to the same deep, warm gold as the patterns in the water. They are synchronizing not just with the river, but with each other. All dissonance is smoothed away. The community becomes a single, pulsing, silent organism, bound by light, standing at the edge of their glowing, living world. The ritual continues for hours, until the last of the spore paste is given to the river. The gold and cyan patterns drift away, merging with the greater light, and the flow returns to its steady, cyan pulse. The still fox stand in the fading blue light of the lamplight. Their own internal glows soft and steady. The long night has begun. They do not return immediately to their spire homes. They remain by the river, sitting now, their tall forms folded with impossible grace onto the soft, mossy banks. This is the time of the second silence. In this deep quiet, the elders share the old knowledge. The history they just wove into the river is now reinforced through silent, mental communion. The still folk possess a form of shared consciousness, a gentle, low-energy telepathy. It is not perceived as voices, but as a slow, shared understanding, a passing of resonant feeling and ancient imagery. They do not have a myth of creation. Their oldest legends do not speak of a beginning, but of an awakening. According to these ancient thoughts, the world itself, the basalt plains, the spires, the heavy air, was here first, existing in a long, dormant silence under the light of the Red Hearth alone. The world was asleep. The spires, they believe, are not stone, but the solidified, sleeping thoughts of the planet. The awakening, the legends tell, was the arrival of the Lamplight. When its cold, blue fire first cut the sky, its new energy touched the sleeping world, and the luminous flows were born. The flows, in their mythology, are the world's dreaming mind, finally stirred and given a way to move. And from this dreaming, the still folk themselves awoke. They do not see themselves as separate from Aethelgard. They are simply one part of its waking consciousness. They are the part that can move and tend and observe. The trilopeds are the part that harmonizes. The sky jellies are the part that floats. The spires are the part that remembers. Their most sacred and most sorrowful myth concerns a different people. A people now lost to time, known only in the deepest shared memories as the Stone Singers. The legends do not describe their appearance. They are a presence, a memory of a sound. Unlike the silent still folk, the Stone Singers were creatures of voice. They lived, it is believed, in the age before the Spore-fall, when the air was clearer, sharper. Their technology was sound. The myths tell of how they could shape the basalt rock itself by singing in precise, complex harmony. They sang caves into existence. They sang bridges between the high spires. They sang the rock into tools and art. But the world, the myth suggests, was changing. The great fungal forests were rising, and the air was beginning to thicken with the first spores. Their resonant songs began to dampen, the air growing too heavy to carry the precise frequencies needed to shape the stone. The Stone Singers, in their grief, gathered for one last chorus. They sang their final, greatest song, attempting to create a permanent monument to their existence. But the air was too thick. The sound was wrong. The song failed, and in its failure, it did not shape the rock, but shattered it. The legends tell that the great canyons, now filled by the luminous flows, are the discordant, broken echoes of this final, failed song. The still folk believe the Stone Singers are not truly gone. They are simply dormant, their spirits sealed within the basalt, waiting for the air to clear, waiting for a time when their songs can once again move the world. Sometimes, when a trilopede herd strikes a particular chord, or the wind hums through a specific spire crevice, the still folk will pause, their lights flickering. They will listen motionless for that ancient, lost vibration, the echo of the Stone Singers, asleep in the dark, silent rock. The shared memories fade. The resonance of the Stone Singers recedes, settling back into the deep, quiet basalt. The second silence is complete. The still folk rise, their movements as slow and fluid as the luminous flows they have just tended. The long night is now absolute. The Red Hearth is gone. The blue lamplight has followed it over the horizon. Aethelgard is left in its own internal luminescence. The world is lit only by the soft, cyan pulse of the great light rivers, casting a gentle, dreaming glow upwards onto the underside of the heavy, spore-filled clouds. In this deep, soft dark, the still folk begin their journey home. There is no urgency. They move in their silent lines, ascending the basalt paths toward their spires. Their own internal lights are all but extinguished, dimmed to the faintest possible glow. They move as shadows through a world of shadows, trusting the familiar contours of the rock beneath their feet. The fungal forests are breathing. In the total absence of the suns, the great caps slowly contract, releasing their spores for the night. The air grows even thicker, filled with a glittering, phosphorescent dust that hangs in the air, unmoving, like a frozen nebula. A tralopede herd, settled in a deep hollow, hums in its sleep. The sound is lower now, a deep, resonant bass note that seems to come from the ground itself. It is the sound of the world's deep, slow heartbeat. High above, a lone sky jelly drifts over the plain, its own faint pulse a tiny, rhythmic star in the dark, heavy air. The still folk reach their spire homes. They do not close doors or light fires. They simply slip back into their wind-carved hollows, settling onto the beds of living, velvet moss. They fold their long limbs, and their bark-like bodies become indistinguishable from the walls of the cave. Their minds join the second silence, releasing the day, releasing the ritual, releasing the stories. They enter a state of photosynthetic rest, their energy drawn from the stored light of the day, their consciousness merging with the slow, sleeping thoughts of the spires around them. The world settles. The only movement is the luminous flow, the planet's dreaming mind, pulsing in its great, slow, cyan waves. It moves through the dark canyons, carrying the last, fading swirls of golden light from the evening's ritual. The sound of Aethelgard is the wind, a low, soft hum, moving through the high fungal spires. The sound of the basalt plains, cooling in the long, spore-filled night. The world is breathing. In and out, the light pulses. The wind hums. The herds thrum in their sleep. All is quiet. All is still. The great, slow rotation of Aethelgard continues, turning its face away from its sons, embracing the deep, restorative peace of the long night. But the long night is not uniform across Aethelgard. The planet's slow, gentle tilt creates vast regions of profound difference. Far from the basalt plains, beyond the great, dark oceans of spore-thickened water, lie the crystalline spires. This is the frozen roof of the world. Here, the mountains are not dark, porous basalt. They are massive, semi-translucent spires of ancient, mineral-laced ice and crystal, rising miles into the thin, cold air. They are the collected, frozen breath of the planet, solidified over eons. In this high, cold place, the luminous flows do not exist. The ground is dark, frozen, and silent. And yet there's light. During the long night, the crystalline spires gather the faint, ambient starlight and the far distant, refracted glow of the two suns, now grazing the far horizon. The mountains themselves seem to collect this light, drawing it deep inside. The spires glow from within, a faint, cold, prismatic light that shimmers with hues of pale violet, ice blue, and soft green. The light is not steady. It seems to breathe, to move, to shift in slow, silent waves, as if trapped within the crystal lattice of the mountains themselves. The air is sharp and thin. There are no spores here. The atmosphere is filled with a fine, glittering dust of ice, so small it hangs in the air like a permanent, frozen mist. And in this mist, the wind creates the auroral chimes. As the slow, cold currents of the upper atmosphere move through the passes, they brush against the trillions of suspended ice crystals and against the sharp, resonant edges of the mountains. It does not create a howl. It creates a sound, a high, faint, complex harmony of tiny, clear bells. A constant, shifting, ethereal music is the sound of the cold, made audible. This music is accompanied by light. The friction of the wind and the ice crystal mist creates a slow, static luminescence. Great, silent ribbons of pale green and violet light hang in the air, shifting with the wind, moving in time to the high, clear chimes. This is a land of cold, ringing, and beautiful desolation, and it is not uninhabited. Living on the sheer, glittering faces of the spires are the creatures known as the Sky Weavers. They are small, delicate, six-legged beings. Their bodies are covered in a thick, insulating fur that resembles spun glass, a shimmering, silvery white that perfectly matches the prismatic ice. Their feet are tipped with small, sharp, crystalline claws, allowing them to move with impossible, silent grace across the sheer, vertical faces of the spires. Their most prominent feature is their eyes. In the faint ambient light of the glowing mountains, their eyes are enormous, dark, liquid pools, reflecting the cold, shifting auroras around them. They see in spectrums of light and energy invisible to other creatures. The Sky Weavers live in small, familial groups in shallow caves carved not from the ice, but behind the great, slow-moving glaciers that coat the spires. They live in a space between the mountain and the ice. They do not hunt. They do not tend fungi. They are, in the truest sense, weavers. Their sustenance, their shelter, and their entire culture is based on harvesting the light threads. These are the visible, energetic strands of the auroral chimes, the static, luminous ribbons of light created by the wind. To the Sky Weavers, this light is a physical, tangible material. To the eyes of a Sky Weaver, the ribbons of aurora are not just light. They are a flowing, ethereal substance, a river of cold energy streaming through the air. Where the light is brightest, the sound of the auroral chimes is sharpest. The Sky Weavers perceive this as a single, unified phenomenon, a song of light. Their claws, made of the same resonant crystal as the mountains, can interact with this energy. By tapping a claw onto the rock face in a precise, rhythmic pattern, a Sky Weaver can attune itself to a specific frequency, a single note within the greater chime. When this attunement is achieved, the threads of light become tractable. The Sky Weaver will anchor itself to the ice wall, its glass fur rippling in the cold wind. It will then extend its forelimbs, not into the air, but into the sound. With slow, deliberate movements, it begins to gather the light. It is a process that resembles pulling, combing, and weaving all at once. The light threads, cold and vibrant, adhere to their claws. They are drawn from the air and spooled into a small, glowing bundle, held against the weaver's chest. This gathered light is their only food. They do not eat in a traditional sense. They absorb the energy directly. A single, tightly woven bundle of the brightest, clearest light threads can sustain a Sky Weaver for many days through the long night. It is a slow, cold, and silent form of nourishment. But this is only the most basic use of their harvest. Their true purpose is to weave. Inside their glacial caves, in the dim, blue light that filters through the ice, they create their world. The harvested light threads, when first gathered, are volatile and ephemeral. But when woven together, when their energies are knotted and looped in the complex, ancestral patterns of the weavers, they begin to solidify. The light congeals, hardening not into crystal, but into a substance resembling flexible, self-illuminating glass. It is warm to the touch. With this solidified light, they weave their shelters. Their caves are lined with light pelts, thick, woven mats of glowing, warm energy. These mats seal the caves from the wind and the cold, creating a stable, gentle warmth. The light they emit is steady, a soft, violet-white glow that illuminates their homes. They also weave their memories. The Sky Weavers have no spoken language. Their history is not told, it is woven. An elder Sky Weaver, near the end of its life, will spend its remaining days weaving its most significant memories into a story cloth. These are intricate, complex tapestries of solidified light. A specific pattern of knots might represent a particularly cold, long night. A swirl of green and violet thread might be the memory of a rare, powerful aurora. When a young Sky Weaver touches a story cloth, it does not just see the pattern, it feels the memory. The stored energy of the light, encoded by the weaver, releases its information, a sense of cold, a feeling of safety, the faint, resonant chime of a specific time and place. This is how their knowledge is passed. A silent, tactile, luminous library, woven from the captured sound of the wind and the light of the stars. In the deepest, oldest caves, the ancestor cloths hang, some so ancient their light has dimmed to a bare, ghostly trace. They are the complete history of the crystalline spires, a silent, glowing record of a people who eat light and weave their own thoughts into existence. This is the rhythm of the high, cold north, a life woven from sound and light. And between the crystalline spires and the basalt plains, the planet is girdled by its great, quiet oceans. The water is not clear. It is heavy, thickened by the same ancient spores that fill the lower atmosphere. The water is viscous, and the light of the two suns does not penetrate far beneath its surface. The waves are slow, heavy folds rolling across a dark, cyan-gray expanse. They do not crash against the basalt shores. They arrive with a low, soft thud, a heavy, rhythmic pulse, depositing thick layers of rich, organic foam. Far from the land, in the deepest, oldest trenches of the world, the ocean is a place of absolute, unbroken stillness. Here, in the cold, crushing dark, the spores do not circulate. They have settled over millennia, creating a soft, deep bed on the ocean floor, a blanket of dormant life many miles thick. This is the sunken choir. There are no living creatures here. There is no light. There is no sound. But there is structure. Rising from the deep, spore-covered floor are immense, silent shapes. They are not basalt, nor are they crystal. They are the first spires, the ancient, mythological structures referenced in the second silence of the still folk. They are vast, smooth, impossibly ancient pillars. Their composition is unknown. They are perfectly black, absorbing all energy, reflecting no light. They are cold, still, and silent. They are the memory of a world before this one, a civilization that rose and fell and was covered by the spores and the sea. The still folk and the sky weavers do not know this. To them, it is a myth, a half-remembered resonance in a song, or a faded pattern in an ancient woven cloth. But the structures remain in the deep, quiet final dark. They are the planet's dormant memory, held in the cold, silent water under the weight of the sky. And so, the long night of Aethelgard continues. On the high, frozen roof of the world, the sky weavers rest in their warm, glowing pelts, surrounded by the woven memories of their ancestors. Outside their glacial caves, the wind moves through the crystal mountains, playing the high, faint, ethereal music of the auroral chimes. On the dark, basalt plains, the still folk are deep in their photosynthetic rest, their minds merged with the spires. The great, cyan rivers of the luminous flow pulse gently, carrying the planet's dim, internal light through the dark, fungal forests. The tralopede herds hum in their sleep, a sound like the breathing of the land itself. And in the deep, spore-thickened oceans, the heavy, slow waves fold against the shore, while far below, the first spires keep their long, unbroken silence. The two suns, the Red Hearth and the Lamplight, are far away. The world is lit only by its own internal glow, and the faint, cold light of the distant stars captured in the ice. The planet turns, slowly, toward its distant morning. But for now, there's only the long night. The flows pulse. The chimes ring. The world rests.